Everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 5, The Pirate. As you can see, I got my helmets, I got my darksaber. For as long as that stays lit, it's typically for a long time, so we'll see if it if it actually stays on the whole review. I know I'm behind on this. I gotta review this, and of course I have to review the next episode as well, but I wanted to keep them separate because there's definitely a conversation to be had with, 2 more episodes to go. There's a conversation to be had. I'm more on the positive end compared to like just about everybody else, but we'll get to that when we get to that review because I'm sure a lot of you understand why there's some stuff to talk about. But for this one, it was a fun episode. It was a good Mandalorian episode. It reminded me a lot, especially considering they go back to the same location, even though it looks completely different. But it reminds me a lot of episode 3 from the very first season, which was like the wildest moment in my life at that point in time. And then that post-credit sequence came. I saw this beautiful thing in live action and I cried. And then that's a true story. That's the one thing I wish I recorded, was my reaction to that. But this was a fun episode. Like, we have, obviously the pirate character comes back. Everybody was like, all right, is he going to be the main villain? Probably not. We'll see what happens with him. Comes back. In only this episode, he ain't coming back again. He could, he could pull it ultra Star Wars and he comes in, they've been doing the cybernetic stuff. They did a buttload in Boba Fett, but I don't think he's coming back. I think he's gone after this one, but he comes back. He tries to take over Navarro. It's like, hey, this is what's going to happen. I know you're not actually protected, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to shoot. I'm going to start blasting, classic. So they're like, all right, we need help. Let's get help from, the New Republic. So of course, we get to see like the one guy that we see all the time, which a lot of people referenced, especially in this episode, was like, this definitely feels like some of the plot lines that would have been kind of, some stuff we would have seen if they'd actually continued with the Rangers of the New Republic series with Gina Carano. And it was like, okay, I actually like how it's being handled in this, where we have, one character. And of course, we have to talk about this before we get into all the story and all that stuff. He gets the message, he plays it, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? A dude walks behind him, and it's Zeb. And man, oh man, he looks so good. I was like, okay, Zeb is in it. Let's see how it goes. Like I'd heard it, I'd seen, like, I saw glimpses, but I didn't actually look at anything. And the episode plays, and I'm like, he's fully CG. But Dave Filoni must have been over somebody's actual shoulder, like, that doesn't look like all the money's going into it, so do better. Because like it was ridiculous how good the character looked. And of course, the man, the myth, the space cowboy himself, Steve Bloom, showed up to voice the character once again. So of course they got him back. It would have been insane if they didn't get the actual voice actor, but it was great. I was like, he didn't say too much. He wasn't in the whole episode, because I thought for sure there was some real hope in me where I was like, what if they just do it where it's like, like he could just go with him. But it was just like, all right, good luck. That's a very Zeb thing to do, though. Zeb wasn't, his times have changed. I mean, he's in like the New Republic blue. That actually looked really cool on him. Like he was never in a flight suit in Rebels. Watch Rebels. I have to say that all the time. I know it's one of the weirdest things ever. But man, the animated stuff is so much more mature than most other animated things. But it's CG, and so people are just like, they just don't touch it. And I swear, people still be missing out. They just don't understand yet, but someday everybody will get it. Just watch Rebels, watch Clone Wars. They're both phenomenal. Watch the Bad Batch, watch them in order. Watch Clone Wars, then get into Rebels, and then Bad Batch last. But they're all so good. But people were just like, it's animated, meh. And it's like, you miss out on so much stuff. But fortunately, this episode was a lot of epic stuff. We got a bunch of action from all the Mandalorians going across Navarro, taking out the pirates, helping out the townsfolk, flying around, getting pinned down. The armorer is like, all right, let me just go ahead, whack some people. Like that, I don't understand how. Like, I know they're all good, they're all fighters, but I'm just like, she just survives. Like she just be throwing the same 2 weapons, just keeping them around, just hitting people in the head. And the dude on the Gatling gun was paying no attention, because I'm like, his buddy was right next to him and was just getting wailed on, and he's just like, yeah, I'm shooting people up. And she just whacks him in the head and takes him out. And I'm like, he just wasn't paying attention. That's on him. But loved all the action all the way through. I thought it was fun, them kind of, like I said, flying around the city, taking people out, doing their like actual stuff as a unit, or multiple units really, throughout the town. And that was just super cool. They say based on all of the people leaving, which is very funny. I always have my moments. Like I've been loving this season. Personally, I think it's my favorite, especially with the most recent episode. I've officially decided, like, this is my favorite season. I understand why it's not a lot of people, pretty much anybody else's favorite season. I think part of that also comes from not watching, Rebels and Clone Wars and enjoying that as much. But for a lot of people, even people who do like that, they still don't enjoy it, but we'll get into that later. But this is one of those moments where it has nothing to do with, you know, like where we're going in the season or anything like that, but it's definitely production wise, where it's like, okay, evacuate the city, right? People here, people there, everybody scattered and running. You have the leader of the city is like, all right, we get the people out. And then they show the people, it was like, you guys hire like 12 extras. They couldn't just think to hire, like, let's actually get like 30 to 40 people. Like, I wouldn't expect the actual entire town, because I would assume the whole town would be hundreds of people. Even if it was like, here's like 40 people, I would have been like, that's a lot of people to see. But it looked like a dozen people. It looked like it was him and then 13 others. And I'm like, that is nothing. They couldn't just like at least 20, maybe they had 20, but I'm telling you, it felt like there were 12 people with him. And I was like, what they should have done is just not done a wide shot. Just have it like through the crowds and you just make it seem like there's more people. Always have it where it's close-ups on him, or if you see people, it's like close on one person, you only see like 3 or 4 people at a time. But they do that wide shot and I'm like, so he evacuated the whole town, everybody went with him, you know, a dozen people. It was weird. It was very weird. And I was like, they really should have just had more people or just shot it differently, because that made no sense to me. So that was definitely one thing that stood out, where I was like, that doesn't make sense. That's not a lot of people for like everyone evacuating with him and stuff. And it was just like, that does not compute. But the rest of the rest of the episode was fun. Of course, everyone ends up leaving the comment because they've been busted, but also they need to leave. I talked about this before. Thank God that they're just gone. But they also get a new tract of land. So now they have a new home on Navarro. So they're like, the peacekeepers within the town is like, hey, you know, we might not be controlled by the Empire, so pirates aren't, don't have to worry about that. But we're not under the New Republic either. It was like, well, then you got no protection from that. But we got Mandalorians like right over there, and it's like a whole thing of like all the Mandalorians, they're like right over there. So they're protected. It's like once that gets out into the galaxy, it's like, yeah, so the Mandalorians totally settled at Navarro. That place is 100% safe. Nobody's gonna be like, I'm gonna beat up some Mandalorians. That's not how that works. That does not work unless you are like a Sith Lord or the Empire. You're not like, let's beat up the Mandalorians. You're just not, that's not even a thing. There's literally no concept. Like the word of it is just like, well, that place safe, off limits, like it's Mandalorians. You're not going to do that. So the way that worked together, I thought it was really well done by the end, where it's like, hey, you guys have the land over there. You may not have a home to go back to. Like you can't go to Mandalore, but this is your home now. Like you can stay here. It's, like their new convent, which is way better than the place where they could just get rolled up on by giant crocodiles and multiple kids just get swooped and they're like, oh damn, there's a kid. So thank God they're gone, because I don't have to complain about it. We don't have to think about how illogical it is. I don't even want to think about the fact that they never had ships. So he even says it, where it's like, we don't have any ships. And I think I referenced it one other time in the review, but I did think about that, because I'm like, what is the deal here? Because I think it was when Bo-Katan went to save the kid, it was like, nobody else has ever thought to just get on a ship and like chase the thing or find out where it's at and scout a location. They can't. I don't know how they got on that planet to begin with. It's a mystery. There's stuff that doesn't work in this season. Don't get me wrong. It's my favorite overall, but there's some wild stuff in this season that's just like, I don't think you guys like just storyboard it, like planet, galaxy, no ships. How does that work? Point A to point B can't happen with no travel. It's weird. It's a mystery, great mystery of the universe. But still love this episode. Still love it this season. The air combat was great too, because of course they were all on the ground, but definitely Bo-Katan, Din flying their ships, just great every time. Both the ships look amazing. So whatever they do in the ships looks amazing, and I'm just like, that's cool. We got like him in the N1 is still absolutely ridiculous, and it's cool and silver and just flying around at breakneck speeds and stuff, because it's super it's basically like a sports car. So it's like boom, you can like quick turn and everything like that. And then Bo-Katan has her ship, which is like a higher class fighter ship, and that just looks super cool, and it's the one that has multiple room for actual people and stuff like that. So that's where they can do the real plans, and it's not just me and my son. So I love the difference between the ships, especially them. This whole season has definitely been like these two together. Like these are the Mandalorians. Once again, going to the next episode, I know how people are feeling, but I'm loving it. I've always loved Bo-Katan. I like her more than Din. I mean, personally, I love the show, but Din as a character is just cool because it's like, okay, he does cool stuff. He does Mandalorian stuff. That's always been my attachment to Din. I'm like, he's a Mandalorian. That's why I like him. It's never really been, even through the first 2 seasons, aside from him caring about Grogu, there ain't that much. That's all there ever really was. It was like he cared about Grogu and he followed his convent. And that's about it. And that's what he does. That's his character. So I've always liked Bo more because I've known her longer. She has more of an arc than he does. And obviously he's a newer character. He's just super cool. I wish he had his gun so bad. That's like the one thing I really miss. I miss the staff because I just love a good staff. But like, you know, the Razor Crest, whatever. N1 is sweeter. But I miss his gun. I can't remember. I think it was called a pulse rifle. But I miss that. I miss that so bad. That's like the one thing where I'm like, I really wish that was not destroyed. Because I wish he had his blaster. I wish he had his rifle so that he could still do his gunslinger moves. But from a distance, boom, just zap somebody. Like it was cool when he did it. So I will miss that. Excuse me. And I hope they, like, at some point, I do hope he gets a long range weapon again, even if it's not that exact weapon, because I know the whole point of that was like, hey, it's a reference to Boba Fett's first appearance and all that. But it was sweet. Like the way they used it was actually really well done. And so it really sucks that that's gone. And it's probably hard for him to have that on the N1. I mean, he doesn't have a droid, so it could just stick up in the ship, or I don't know. They could figure something out with it, I'm sure. There's got to have some form of cargo space in some way, shape, or form, just to put one long rifle. There has to be. But I don't think they're concerned about giving him his gun back anyway at this point. So that, you know, that's real tragic. But loving everything that they're doing so far. I love the action in this one. Love the fact that by the end we have the Mandalorians have a new home planet. We have Bo-Katan being told by the armorer that she's allowed to take her helmet off, because now that we have the means to actually like come together, like they join for, you know, like she's honestly, it's kind of weird, like just a little bit weird that she's constantly led them on all their missions. Like I know she has experience, you know, being obviously the princess and everything that she's done war wise. She does have the most experience, so it makes sense, but it does feel a little weird that they trust her as much as they do. But at the same time, that's kind of what they do. It's like, hey, you did the thing, you know, this is the way. 100% trust. That's just how they are, like in that sect. So it feels weird, but at the same time, it makes sense for how devoted they are. Where it's like, if you are a part of us, that is it. Like, I mean, they even reference it again, where it was like back in the, you know, episode 3 of the series, it was like, hey, a buttload of us sacrificed ourselves because he decided to take on a foundling, and like a bunch of us died. And that's what we chose to do, was fight against an entire town, basically, and every mercenary in this town, to protect one of our own, including a foundling, which they reference, you know, in the last episode, is like the greatest honor. So I thought that was interesting. It was like, hey, you know, they've gone through a lot. We've seen them do a buttload of stuff throughout this series. And then, you know, by the end of this one, it's like, hey, they've come together, and Bo-Katan is now capable of, you know, she's already kind of walked both worlds. So she is now sent out as like an ambassador pretty much to get everybody else kind of wrapped up in line. It's like, now we take back Mandalore. And it's like, okay, that's crazy. Let's see how that goes. We only have 2 episodes left, considering the next, you know, episode 7 has already come out. But I am curious how that's going to play out ultimately. Like them taking back, not just going back to it, because really taking it back, no one owns it. It's just wiped out and absolutely destroyed. But if they go there as a collective, unless the Empire comes swooping back in, they can actually rebuild it again. And so it'll be interesting to see. We won't see it this season, of course, because it would take too long it would be the most insane montage on Earth if they're like, here's a montage of them rebuilding Mandalore, and it's like, you know, it would take years for them to do that sort of thing. So we won't see it this season, but that is where they're headed. So I'm very curious about what's going to happen, you know, kind of going forward in these last 2 episodes, because that's their mission as of now, is to get everyone back together and then, you know, reclaim Mandalore. So I'm excited for that. I think they might end up making that stake by the end of the season, but it obviously won't be completed. Like they'll be ready to start at least. And of course that depends also, because at the very end of this episode, it was like, oh, there's Beskar. Like, was Moff Gideon rescued by Mandalorians? It's possible. A lot of people have mentioned it a bunch of times with the armor, where it's like, is she, first off, a lot of people are like, I don't know if she has like some other alternate angle, which, you know, the whole thing with her and Bo-Katan, like, was she testing her? Is like, do you respect my station? What is your station technically? Because you're like, I don't know, like, as Din Djarin is technically the leader, couldn't he just change things? So there's a lot of questions. Obviously, then just does his thing so much where he doesn't even come close to the leadership stuff. Honestly, I do wish they would touch on it a little bit more. That I would say is like the one thing that I wish was touched on a lot more in this season is the fact that he is technically the leader, and they don't really go to him question-wise, where it's like, technically speaking, he is the leader of Mandalore at this moment. They kind of reference it. I felt like, honestly, this was the first episode, which is unfortunate. This is probably the most unfortunate thing. This was the first episode I felt they even referenced the fact that he was the current leader, because when she takes off her helmet and the armor's like, she's already walked both paths, and she's proven that she's devoted to us, fairly recently with everything that she just did, leading all the new missions and everything, and saving a child. She's gonna go out and like we bring everyone back together. And then Paz Vizsla, who is like the big dude with the Gatling gun, he looks over at Din, and then Din just he gives him a classic Mando nod, improvement. So I was like, okay, that's like the one time I felt they referenced it, because it was like, if he doesn't agree with this, he's still the leader of Mandalore. And I felt like that was the one time there was any like, and it was still nonverbal, so it was kind of just like, if you realize that's why he bothered looking at him, you understand. And that's still me assuming, but I assume because of who this character is, Paz Vizsla always like follows the rules and stuff. And it's like, okay, the armor already has a really high station, so she made that declaration like this can happen because she's already done this. She wasn't always with our people. She was, she's the princess of Mandalore. Like, everybody knows what she's gone through and everything she's done. So it's like, this is what she's going to do next. But it's still like, that dude's the leader, so let me just, all right, out of approval, we're, she's good to go. You say she's good, but I'm gonna still look at him because he is technically the leader. And that's like the only reference we've ever truly had of that throughout the season, because they don't really go to him for that sort of, honestly, they've been staying put. That's pretty much all they've done. I guess they haven't had a lot of the reasons to go to him as like the Mandalorian leader. It's kind of just like, they just been sitting in their cave and just hanging out, and that's really about it. That's all they've actually done. And then there's been missions here and there, but they, aside from him and obviously our two main characters, really, like Din and Bo-Katan being the ones to be like, hey, let's change some things up here and there, and let's kind of get our people together. Everyone else is kind of sitting pretty. That's just how it's been. So this is like the one true acknowledgement, which I will say is personally the only thing that I don't like about this season, because they've done a buttload for Mandalorians, obviously showing Mandalore all the stuff with Bo-Katan and seeing the mythosaur, the armor, obviously. This was also the episode where we actually got to understand how she truly felt about the mythosaur thing, because she was like, this is the way that last time. And even then, I mentioned in my review, I was like, I don't understand, like, does she just not care? Like, what's the deal here? So I think this was the one that kind of finally answered that, where she took time to think on it, and it was like, okay, I understand now. It was like, before it seemed like it was going to be Din, because he went to Mandalore, but I was like, we had two people do it. Like, both of them went to Mandalore, but only one of them actually saw the mythosaur. He somehow fell 15,000 feet in a single second. We don't have to go back to that either. But she saw the mythosaur, and it's like, all right, she is like a path to something new for Mandalorians again, potentially. I mean, her whole history, honestly, if you Clone Wars, Rebels, everything, her whole history is the fact that she constantly makes it, and then it's disaster. It always fails for her, and that's super effed up. I don't know if they'll show that. I don't know if they'll straight up kill her off, but it would totally fit in line with her character, like her story. I mean, literally, it was like, yep, I was totally ruling back then. Then the Empire came in, and Moff Gideon somehow got the Darksaber, and then I was by my side, I had my couple of folks with me, and that was it. So that's like her cyclical story. I would love to have a much nicer ending, but who knows? Maybe for once things will just work out okay. We'll just see things work for her, but I really don't know, because that is how her story has been so far. But I did enjoy this episode. It was definitely the great action episode. Them getting the plot of land, that's definitely gonna have more of an impact once again, kind of next season stuff, because they only got 2 episodes left at this point. So there's not really a lot that they're gonna do as far as expansion on them being within Navarro and stuff like that. So I am looking forward to that. That's definitely a giant seed more for next season than it is for this season, because we still have a couple things left to do. We'll see what happens with the villain stuff. I always thought it didn't matter that they didn't have a villain. Them kind of teasing them off Gideon stuff, I was fine with, and we'll see what happens. I mean, he has to be in the last 2. I assume that he's going to be in the last 2 like crazy. And it reminded me a lot of the first season, where he doesn't show up until like the end of like episode 7, I think, and all 3 seasons are 8 episodes. I'm pretty sure in the first season it was the same thing. Like he was the main villain, but he doesn't actually show up until like the end of 7, and then he's actually the villain in 8. And then season 2 comes along, and he's still not really that much of a villain. Like he's the overall villain, but once again, he's not in the actual show until like the season finale. It's actually funny how little he's truly the villain, like the main like focus of an episode as the villain throughout this entire series. But he's, you know, he is the series big bad at this point, especially considering he's once again free. We'll see what happens in these last 2 episodes, but I'm looking forward to whatever they end up doing in these final 2. Obviously, having seen episode 7, I know where that goes, so I'll be jumping on that review very soon, immediately after this actually. But we'll let us know what you guys thought about this one. It was definitely the action episode. All the reviews I watched, everybody was pretty much like, it's super fun, but it should have been like maybe episode like 3 or 4 or something like that before, you know, not like episode 7 where everyone feels like we don't really have anything. I was fine with it. I liked the, you know, the plot of the land stuff. I thought it was, you know, incremental steps for everything they're doing. I think it's bigger steps for characters, smaller steps for Mandalorians as a whole. That's how I felt like this whole season is really played out. Like each episode might seem really small, but it'll be like, this thing happened for Bo-Katan, this thing happened for Din, or, you know, this thing happened for both of them, or someone realized something, and then that kind of affects like the future of all Mandalorians. So there's, you know, constantly little things here and there. Like pretty much that's what this whole season has been, is like, it's a build-up season. It's probably my favorite build-up season ever. Every time I think about this season, I think of, Castlevania season 3. And that was definitely the down season, because season 1 and 2 were definitely like super tight knit. And then it was like, okay, we're restructuring the show and building things back up. And that whole season was built up. Although that season finale, if you have not watched Castlevania, you are missing out. Once again, animation, my God, that junk is so pretty. But that whole season was built up, and then it allowed for the next season to be like one of the craziest things ever, because it was like this whole season was like this plot line, these eggs, this Easter reference here, Easter egg here, all this stuff built up. And then season 4 was just like, they just dropped the hammer and everything was just absolutely amazing. So I think that's what we could get with this. But unfortunately, I love this season personally. So I know it's not for everybody. I've been having a fantastic time, but we'll let you know what you guys thought about this episode. You know, where we're headed, obviously, with the last 2 episodes, but in general, where you guys think we're headed. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.